Hey, this is WhyBeAre with BeamNG.drive, and today we're going to be going over update 0.4.2.0. Yes, it is literally the 420 update, so let's get that joke out of the way and move on to the Hirochi SBR4, which is a new vehicle for this version of the game, and I plan to do a whole video for it later on, but right now I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the vehicle in the update video as well. So it is a two-door vehicle with 4 seats on the inside and a rear engine configuration that can be either all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive, depending on which configuration you choose. It also has a neat active aero feature. Once you surpass 55 miles per hour, you have the spoiler come up, and then when you brake really hard, it'll also lift even higher to help slow you down. So I thought that was pretty cool because I've never seen that before. And we can go ahead and take a look at the interior once I get it to a little bit brighter of an area so you can see it properly. And there you go. It looks like a pretty nice interior, but you'll notice those rear seats look pretty cramped back there. I don't know if you can fit much more than a child in those rear seats. I think that's about all you'd be able to do because an adult probably not going to fit back there. Anyways, though, I think we can go ahead and crash this thing into a wall or something. I don't want to do too big of a crash, but I want to do enough of a crash so you can see some damage. So I'm thinking maybe about 70, 60 miles per hour, somewhere in that area should be good. So 68 mile per hour crash right there. And that rear hatch looked a little jiggly. That was unusual. I've never seen that before in the few crashes I've done. Now you might be thinking, oh yeah, there's no way this car can drive. You gotta remember, rear engine configuration! So it takes a lot to actually kill it from front impacts because all the important bits to actually go forward and backwards are in the rear. Now, steering ability, yeah, that's been compromised. We can't go left or right really, but we can still accelerate and do a mean burnout. That's about it right now, is just do a mean burnout. I can actually kind of steer this just a little bit, so maybe if I really was dedicated, I could get this thing moving again, but this is taking way too long. So instead of doing that, let's take a look at some of the other new vehicles. Now I say vehicles because they're in the vehicle selector, but they're not exactly vehicles. Like one of them is the rollover sled, which if I was to spawn right now would spawn slightly underground and not function. So I'm going to first make the SBR4 into a higher sitting up vehicle like the truck, and then we're going to spawn the sled because the sled is not affected by gravity or anything like that. So if it spawns underground, it's going to stay underground. If I spawn it a mile in the air, it's going to stay a mile in the air. I want it spawning basically like it's on the ground, even if it's ever so slightly not. And all we have to do to use this is just park a vehicle on the sled in the middle right here, and you can or cannot use the parking brake. It's all up to you. And then you become the sled and hit the parking brake on the sled, and just like that, the sled activates, and you get about a half dozen rolls on a vehicle on average. That one was a little bit over average, actually. That was a nice roll. I got, I think, a little bit more than a half dozen there, and you take a look at how the vehicle withstood that, and it looks like the driver's compartment is safe in that rollover test, so the truck succeeds on that. Now, if you're a maniac, you could also use this as a way to crush cars. All you have to do is just park a vehicle like right there, and then you close the rollover sled, and it'll come down crushing whatever vehicle is there, although the camera angle is definitely less than ideal. And it didn't crush it all the way, so you could try to bring it back and forth, which sometimes works. Sometimes it takes the truck with it, which it's like, oh, that's not the goal. But yeah, you can kind of crush vehicles with it if you really wanted to. Actually did a pretty good job. Will this drive? No, it's not going to drive at all. Some serious engine damage, that's for sure. So let's go ahead and do one more thing with the sled using a different vehicle, just so you get to see what it looks like using a different vehicle that's a little more likely to roll than the truck. Because the way the truck's designed, it doesn't actually roll that much because it ends up hitting at a kind of an awkward angle that stops it from rolling. So we're going to go ahead and activate the sled, and this time will be the car, so we can follow the car as it rolls, hopefully. See, that one looks a lot more rolling, where the truck kind of started bouncing halfway through. This one rolled the whole way, and it actually landed upright, so if we wanted to, we could put it in the sled again and just have it roll twice. I see no reason why not to. As long as it can get back up, it can roll again. Just parking it right there. And this one, I'll try not using the parking brake just to see what happens. I've actually never tried that before, so I really don't know what's going to happen without the parking brake. If it'll make a difference, it doesn't really make a difference. So it's whatever you fancy. If you want parking brake, go for it. If you don't, well, you don't have to. It's not necessary. And I turned the steering wheel the wrong way, I think, which caused it to not fully roll over, so that'll be the end of testing the SBR on the sled. So one of the other new vehicles I want to look at is the tire wall. So let's go ahead and pick the Hirochi one because we're driving a Hirochi car, so we could crash a Hirochi one into a Hirochi one. And I like saying Hirochi one. It sounds kind of cool. It sounds like a code name or something. The Hirochi one. I don't know. Anyways, I want to hit this thing hard because I want to damage that wall really good. So I'm hoping to get like 100 miles per hour on this collision. And I gotta make sure I don't miss the wall. I don't even know exactly what was the wall when I was far back there. Now I can tell that's definitely the wall, but I had like, is that really the wall? I'm not sure. It is. So first crash is definitely over 100 miles per hour, just like I wanted, and we'll do some slower ones afterwards. So the first thing I want to see is how much speed did I lose? And so we're now in the 30s for miles per hour. So we did lose a lot of speed. And uh-oh, my car just glitched out. That's unfortunate. Looks like the wall is still okay though. And we'll let it kind of bounce around a bit. So it did get a pretty significant amount of damage to the wall, but it didn't glitch out or anything. So let's go ahead and try that again with a lower speed. So we'll do this one at maybe 60-ish. So we'll just kind of start cruising around now. You know, gas on, gas off. I'm not being super exact with this, just 60-ish. So that's a full speed collision. Slowed me down really fast. I have not that much damage for a 60 mile per hour collision, although that missing wheel I think is from the vehicle glitching out. Just ignore that for now. And the wall itself fared a lot better there. It doesn't look like there's too much damage to the tires except for maybe one of them. But it did leave a pretty good indentation on the wall itself. Looking at the tires, they seem to hold up good. Let's go ahead and reset both of those. And there's one more vehicle I think that I wanted to take a look at. That's a new one, and that is I don't know which to say exactly because it's one vehicle, but there are different vehicle options. So it's like, it's kind of a single one, but it's kind of a multi. So it's like ISR. I'm just going to say that ISR, the rocks and boulders. See, right now it's just is. It is a rock, but if I pull up the parts menu, we have more options. So now it's these are rocks. Or is it? Because I'm still talking about only one rock at a time, but then there's one that's multiple rocks. That one, it's definitely these are rocks. I don't know which to say. It's like, it's kind of a singular and plural thing. It's confusing. Anyways, I'm just going to cycle through the rocks. This one is the number 3. It's pretty big. Then you have small ones, though, like number 8. And number 5 is pretty small as well. And I believe number 2 is pretty small as well. That's a little bit more of a medium rock, I would say. Then we have 7, which is, again, a small one. 4, which is a big one. 6, which is a medium big one. Then we have 1, which is another medium big one. And then we have the rock stack, which is multiple rocks. So this one is definitely, there are rocks. So confusing. Like, I don't know which to say. I know which rules to use and when, but I don't know which to say. Now this one, sometimes you'll get it to stand upright. Most of the time it's going to fall over, it seems like. Since I got it to stand upright, though, let's go ahead and try to hit it. Because it's not often that I get to stand upright. So we're going to do this at the same speed we hit the wall of tires at about. So it's like 60-ish miles per hour. And I'll just do like 8 times slow-mo on this. So it's not a huge amount of slow-mo, but enough to see the details of the rocks. And you can tell, actually, the rocks did more damage than the wheels for sure. Because wheels are made to reduce damage. Rocks, yeah, they weren't made to reduce damage at all. Also, I kind of got stuck on one for a second. Luckily, I 4-wheel drive that rock hard. Let me go ahead and reset my vehicle, reset the rocks. Another fun thing you could do, actually, is you get the rocks and you just drop them on your car. So you go like this. And then you have a dented roof. Ooh, I can make a convertible, actually, now that I think about it. Who wants a convertible? Come on, convertible! Oh, a little bit crooked. But I think we got half convertible. So there you go. That's what a half convertible looks like when your passenger is like, I want a convertible. But you're like, no, I don't want a convertible. That's what you get. The poor driver, though, he has a piece of metal going straight through his head. We could also transport the rocks if we really wanted to, even using this car. I mean, I guess you could really use any car. These rocks aren't terribly heavy where the suspension for this car would be compromised or anything. But they do have some weight to them, you know? So let's go ahead and switch to something like Rock 4, which is a pretty big rock. I think it's the biggest rock there is, actually. And we're going to try to drop this on the roof of the car and see how much damage the big rock does. I'm not going to bother with slow-mo on this. We'll do this at full speed, and it didn't even look like it hit it that hard, but it looks like it did a lot of damage. Let's smooth the rock out of the way and see if it'll still drive, I guess. So, rock out the way. What's the car look like? Wow. Now that is a convertible. That is a spiky convertible, though. So we can move the rock so it doesn't land on it again, and then see if it drives. So we'll place the rock over there. And do you drive? Kind of. Like, it did more than I expected. Like, the wheels still spin. That impresses me, and I just now realized it's missing the right rear wheel. Whoops. So you did the best you could, car. But I didn't expect anything out of you, and it looks like the left wheel isn't attached either anyways. I think it came off at some point in time, and I wasn't paying attention. But yeah, that thing crushed that car really good. So last thing I want to try is just crawling over the pile of rocks with something that's actually made to navigate that. You know, this car, no, not going to happen. But if we use an off-road vehicle, it could happen. And I want a real off-roader. I'm not going to get like the four-wheel drive variant. I want the full-blown off-roader just to crawl over some tiny rocks. Yes, it's overkill, but it's fun to have overkill. So first thing I want to do is just bump them over without scratching my bumper too much. And then we can actually try driving over them. So just like that. And I really like having these to drive over versus like the static rocks. Unless it's like a really huge rock, having these small ones that actually move is a lot more fun because it makes off-roading a lot more dynamic. Now, we don't have enough rocks here to get stuck, really, especially with the off-road one. But you can imagine if you had these kind of rocks all over a course. Oh, that'd be so cool, but I have no idea how the game would handle spawning up like 100 separate rocks. I'm assuming it wouldn't do well. But right here, you can see it's just cool how the rocks move. And I think it's a little bit harder to get stuck when the rocks do move because you can, instead of freeing yourself off the rock, you can just shove the rock out of the way sometimes depending on how you're stuck. Anyways, I think that demonstrates that pretty thoroughly. And that's actually a nice ending right there where we're crawling on the rock. So I'm not going to touch anything there because that's beautiful. I think that about covers all the new vehicles. So now it's time to go over the old vehicles and how they've changed. Now, pretty much every vehicle has an improved suspension and improved tire physics model. And they have new thumbnails, as you can see, because the old thumbnails looked like this. And yes, I will be switching between the new and the old version of the game when appropriate to show you the changes because it's a lot easier to do that in some situations like for here. Otherwise, they'd be like, well, the old thumbnails, they had a darker background, the cars were slightly more zoomed in. You know, it's just easier to say, look, here's what the old ones looked like. So now we're just going to go through all of the individual cars and I'll do my very best to show you what the difference is between the current version and the old version. Although a lot of the changes are really difficult to show and some of them are just kind of vague. Like the 200BX in the changelog, it lists improved trunk, but I'm not exactly what about it was improved. Could it be the way it deforms, the way it detaches, or just the general looks? I'm honestly not sure because I can't tell a difference, but it has been improved somehow. So you can see there's an improved trunk. And some other things, though, are a lot easier to show off, like the new steering wheel. It's called the deep dish, like Chicago pizza. The people who make the good pizza, not New York pizza, Chicago pizza. And I'm not even going to debate with you about this. Chicago pizza is better. Getting back on topic, though, you might be looking at this wheel and thinking it looks really similar to a wheel that was already in the game. And it does look similar, but when you switch between them, you can tell they are different wheels. One thing, for example, to look at is right here where the wheel overlaps with like the dash and all that. You can see the racing wheel is actually a different size altogether. You have a much bigger gap here, and the actual design of the wheel itself is pretty much all different except for like the hub. I think the hub looks about the same, but then the rest of the wheel is a different design. Well, the hub is even slightly different even, so it's similar on the hub, but when you switch between them, it's like, oh, these are totally different wheels. And I think that about covers everything there is for the 200BX changes. So let's go ahead and move on to the next car, which is the Grand Marshal. Unfortunately, most of the changes to the Grand Marshal aren't really easy to demonstrate. Like the wheels and engine have been improved. There's now a half shaft beam that can break to cause loss of power to the wheels. So there's another thing that can go wrong because the changelog makes it sound like you could always have power to the wheels before. That's not true. It's just there's another thing that can now break. And then the rear door disappearing glitch, which I experienced, I think, one time off camera, has been fixed. So you guys probably don't know what that is, but I have seen it happen one time. And then it also has the deep dish steering wheel. And that's really all there is to say about the Grand Marshal. It's nothing I can really demonstrate, unfortunately. So let's go ahead and move on to the next vehicle, which is the Ibishu Covet, which has a bunch of changes that are much easier to demonstrate. The first one I want you to be able to listen to is that this is the first car in BeamNG.drive from the developers to have custom sound. There have been a lot of mods that have custom sound, but this is the first official car. So I'm going to drive it around without talking for a while so you can listen to it. And once I respawn, I will talk again. So if you need to adjust your sound, go ahead and do that now. Hopefully by now you've had a chance to adjust your audio settings if necessary. And one thing I haven't mentioned about the new audio for this car is that it is using the new audio system, which basically boils down to you can get more realistic sounding engines in the game now compared to the old system. I don't have a direct comparison between the old and the new because the car sounds are different sounds, because this one has, a little 4-banger engine sound, where the other comparisons all have that generic BeamNG engine sound that you've heard for years and years if you've been watching my videos for years and years. I can't believe this is still driving. That's amazing. I should also mention, though, there have been a lot of other changes to this car. One of them is the deep dish wheel. I know I said I wasn't going to show it off all the time, but it just sounds like pizza. And I love pizza, so why not show it? Some other changes, though. Watching this thing drive is funny. Is some changes to deformation. I don't know exactly what parts, but there's been some deformation changes. The way the half shaft in the front brakes has been changed, so it seems like it's a little bit more durable in my testing, which is good. And then just the way the drivetrain behaves and under damage seems to be a little bit more durable as well, which means you can have a lot more fun with this car because it's even harder to brake. And it was already pretty hard to brake when you were doing rear-end collisions like what I did right there. So lots of fun to be had with the Covet. And then it sounds different, which is nice. Moving on to the next car, which is the Ibishu Pessima. There's a new version of it available, which is the 2.7 LX V6 Sport model, which does not have a deep dish wheel. It has a normal wheel, and the deep dish wheel is not even an option on this car. It does, however, have a custom set of wheels for the sport version of the car. It has a spoiler for the sport version, and then it has a slightly stiffer suspension setup, which doesn't make it feel like a sports car or anything like that. And it's really hard to notice the difference unless you're really pushing it. But when you really push it, it does feel slightly sportier than the non-sport version. And by sportier, I just mean it seems to handle a little bit better. I also had a bunch of improvements to the structure, so it deforms better. The hinges on both the hood and the trunk have been reworked to be more realistic, and I'm slightly stuttering for some reason, so I apologize for that. The engine output on the smaller engine variants has been increased, but it seems like the engine output on the larger 2.7 liter engine is the same. And there have been some texture fixes as well. For example, there was some texture in the inside that was misaligned. I did my very best to try to figure out which one it was. Couldn't figure it out, but it has been fixed, whatever texture that was. Also, there was something on the back bumper where it wouldn't have paint on it. It does now, and again, I did my very best to figure out what that was. Couldn't figure it out. So those are things have been fixed if you noticed them and I didn't. The exhaust also holds on a little bit stronger, I think. I don't think I mentioned that. And the parts in the part selector are named differently. That about covers everything for the Pessima. So let's just go ahead and roll it around a little. And a little safer than I thought. I think it still drive. I was hoping to total it. Oh well. Moving on to the next car, which is the Moonhawk. There's a new version of this one available as well. There is the V8 drag version. The drag version has just over 1,000 horsepower. It has a custom wheelie bar on the back and then a different set of rear tires so it can actually get all that power down. And then it also has a stage 2 supercharger that is actually visible, and the butterfly valves on it do function. So when you go full throttle, they open all the way. When you have like half throttle and all that, it goes at a different angle for that until you crash like that. Unfortunately, I wasn't looking at all where I was going. I was too distracted by the beautiful butterfly valves, because I thought it was really cool that when you accelerated, they actually changed position like a real one would. Just to give you an idea of how fast this is, let's just kind of find a flat area to do some accelerating, which probably the best way to find one is just go in this direction. So I'll just drive over to this corner over here. And the steering on the drag version is terrible because, well, it's a drag car. What do you expect? But it's good enough to maneuver over to here. So we're just gonna accelerate until we flip over or something, basically. So 3, 2, 1, go! Oh, put it in drive. Go! So you can see it lurching forward because of just so much power, and we're already up to 120 miles per hour, 140, and now we're topping out pretty much. So we're not gonna accelerate much more than that. So let's go for a flight. Oh, I guess it also has custom exhaust too. I didn't notice that part. Has a side exiting exhaust system, which you can't see because it's ruined. There we go. Side exiting exhaust, which I don't believe was on any of the other models. And also, here's a closer look at those tires. Those are like super legit drag tires. Those are not street legal outside of like a drag strip. There's also some changes to the normal versions of the car as well. For example, there's 2 of each version now, and they look pretty similar until you look real closely at the front. You'll notice some of them have the front from the 1973 version, some have the front from the 1975. So there's now 2 copies of pretty much every version of the car except for the V8 Special, which only has the front from, I'm assuming, the 1975 version of the car, because to me, those lights look more modern than those lights. So I'm assuming those would have to be the 1975 version, and that's the lights on the Special. And then there are also a bunch of other changes to the Moonhawk, but I want to drive the drag version right now. So we'll talk about the changes that apply to this one and the ones that apply to the normal version. So all versions of the Moonhawk, I should say, have improved stability and deformation. The normal versions have increased engine output, so they're a little bit faster, and I do notice the difference in speed. It actually helps quite a bit when you're trying to drive this car aggressively. There's also the option to add a welded differential if that's your thing, and you could add it to any version of the car. It is a 264 versus a 299 though, so that'll make the drag car slower because it has a higher top speed and then slower acceleration. At least I think that's the way the numbers work. Let's find out if I'm 100% correct or not. So I believe the last one topped out at about 160. This one seems to be topping out a little bit higher, so yes, that's the case. And now we could try these amazing drum brakes to their full capabilities, and well, that didn't go well. I forgot this thing didn't have ABS. I just slammed on the brakes, and halfway through I'm like, oh, it doesn't have ABS. Oh well, we're gonna hit the wall anyways. And I think I forgot to mention it, but this one does have a transmission just for the drag version. It's a 4-speed automatic. Normally it would have a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic. And then this one, like I said, has a stage 2 supercharger, and you could see it right there. There's also a stage 1, which you can see. Before, if you had the supercharged version, you couldn't see the supercharger, and actually you can't highlight it because it's invisible right now. But if we peek through the hole in the hood, or just maybe remove the hood, it's probably the easier solution, you can actually see the supercharger, where in the old version you couldn't see the supercharger at all. It was invisible. So that's nice to be able to see. And while I'm in the parts menu, I believe there's also another set of wheels that have been added, but I don't know what they're actually used for. It's the rally wheels. I can't remember which vehicle it's used on. I think it's used on one of them, but I don't know which. But that's what they look like. So I think that about covers the Moonhawk. Next up is the Pigeon. And for the Pigeon, it's mostly just fixes to the body, suspension, and the seams. But one thing that's really cool is there's a new engine. There's a 600cc i3 fuel-injected engine, and you might be thinking, oh, it's a smaller engine, it's worse. Here's the thing. This is a diesel engine. This is a fuel-injected gasoline engine, and it actually has a different model for that. So if I pulled the top off, you could actually see there's the engine, and then here's what the diesel one looks like. So you can see a totally different design, and interestingly enough, the 600cc is larger overall compared to the 658cc diesel engine. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and add the body back though, and we'll drive this version around. Now this version is fast. It makes like about 100 horsepower at its peak. So if we hit the gas pedal, it kind of moves and then it keeps going. Like there we go. It takes a while to get up to its power band, but when it does, it keeps going and going, and we're going 100 in the Pigeon, which is kilometers per hour, so it's only like 60 miles per hour. I mean, you look at the speedometer, you're like, oh my goodness, the Pigeon's going 100 miles per hour, but it's not. I also like that this engine redlines at like 9,000. I mean, to me, that basically sounds like, yeah, this is a bike engine that was shoved into the Pigeon. I don't know what just happened there. That was weird. The tire just got shredded and it glitched out. Strange. Anyways, back to the engine. I love high revving engines. 9,000 RPM, redline. Who doesn't love that? Yeah, it's pretty gutless below 4,000, 5,000. But when it gets past that, it's pretty fast. I mean, for a 3-wheeled car, it's unsafely fast. And it has a 5-speed transmission, so this thing could probably actually, with enough space, reach close to 100 miles per hour. So that's stupidly fast for something that's this unstable. But that's really the only major change to the Pigeon is that extra engine. So let's move on to the next car, which is the not Hirochi SBR4. We did that one. So the next one is the Sunburst. So there's one new version of the car available, and that's the 2.0 all-wheel drive police package, which seems to be based on the 2.0 front-wheel drive sport, with the addition of all-wheel drive and then the police details, like the lights and the decals and all that. And there are lights all over this thing. There's lights in the front, lights on the top, and lights on the back. So this is like a real detailed out police vehicle that also has different wheels for the police version because, you know, police people, they don't need chrome wheels. Just give them the cheap black looking things that look like space savers almost. They'll be fine. And there's also been some improvements to the suspension, the wheels, and the transmission for this vehicle. And then the way the engine deforms has been improved. And then there's some more power in, I think it was the 1.8 and the 2.0 liter engines, but the turbo versions do not have a bump in power. The ECS has been improved, although I can't really feel a difference because I wasn't too familiar with the way ECS performs previously, and driving it around I don't really notice too big of a difference, but it says it was improved. One thing worth noting though is the sunroof is now an option, so you could choose whether you have it or not. And it has a deep dish wheel, but not in the police version. But you can get the deep dish wheel on like the racing ones. And I think that about covers the Sunburst, so let's crash this police car. That was kind of underwhelming. Aw, the police lights look sad now, though. I can only see one of them. Like, I know the blue one's there, but I just barely angle my camera to see it. Anyways, on to the next car, which is the Civetta Bolide. You'll notice that the stripped versions of the car are gone, so we only have the 320, 390 GTR, and 350 GTR. The 390 GTR has some new wheels, and every version of the car weighs about 300 pounds less than it did in the older version of the car, so they do perform quite a bit better than the old version because that's like a 10% loss of weight. And then the force feedback has been modified for this vehicle, although there's been some overall modifications to the force feedback as well, so you can't really have a direct comparison between this version and the old version. And that's honestly about it for the Bolide that I could find, and that was listed in the changelog, so we're going to move on to the next car once this thing finishes doing its beautiful ballerina moves. Okay, I think it's done there. So next vehicle is, well, we got to skip some, and it is the Gravel D-Series / Roamer. For the Roamer, it's really easy to list the changes. It has some new tires. That's really it. The Roamer is pretty much unchanged. The truck, on the other hand, it has some changes. So let's go ahead and get a truck spawned up so you can see the changes, or at least I could tell you them and try to demonstrate it, but it's kind of hard because they're so small. For the truck, you have some improved suspension in the way it performs and the meshes. So it kind of wobbles less when you kind of slide it or do some vicious maneuvers going left to right and all that. It also has reduced drag, so it should have a higher top speed. I haven't tested it, but I think it should. It has the option for the deep dish wheel, but this version does not have the deep dish wheel. The interior camera has also been changed ever so slightly in its positioning, and the easiest way to show that off is here's the new camera, and here's the old camera, which sits ever so slightly lower than the new one. Moving on to the next vehicle, which is the T-Series. There's a new option of that available, which is the long haul fifth wheel version. So let's go ahead and spawn that up. And you'll see there is now a sleeper cab that you can look at. And you can also remove the door of it so you can see into it properly. And if you get into a crash, you can have the whole cab fall off or just the door. But there you can see the bed inside. And then it also has the heavy duty bumper in the front. And then the hood deflector, which is this little piece of metal right here. And then the camera order has been fixed to match all the other vehicles, so it goes outside, inside, hood, side, outside. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is the van. And the only thing about the van that's been improved is the J-beam structure for the cab. So there's really not too much to say about that one, but let's go and spawn it up anyways, just so I can say I spawned up all of them. Come on, there we go. And that about covers all I have to show off here. It's also worth mentioning there are some new scenarios that you could do and the ability to sort them, so I could find out which ones are the new ones really easily. And I plan to do a video for all these new scenarios in a separate one from this one, so you can look forward to that, but you can at least see what the names are and what they look like. You'll notice this one actually has a broken vehicle at the start, which is a new feature that's been incorporated into the game. And then there are some changes which I'm just going to list off here, which are worth knowing but are kind of hard to demonstrate. So the force feedback has been improved. It now supports the Logitech G920 and the G29, which are the new wheels that are coming out by them soon. It has improvements for the way all the electronic assist in the vehicles work, like the TCS, the ESC, and even the ABS. They've been improved to be a little bit more realistic. The computer is now forced out of power saving mode if you had it in power saving mode to reduce lag, because if you have your computer in power saving mode while you play this game, the computer has a habit of downclocking the CPU, which can cause lag. I always made sure I had it in high performance because I had that issue previously, but it's nice that it does it automatically now. The AI has been improved, and there are new screenshots for when you're loading a map or just sitting around in the main menu. There's also a few small changes on most of the maps, but I'm not going to go over those because they are really minor things which are difficult to exactly find. And if you want a full list of changes, go check out the changelog, which is available on BeamNG.com/blogs. And I think that'll do it for this video.